Deep in Afghanistan, the Taliban ambush a US Navy SEAL team who are now in mortal danger.
I can remember just pleading over the radios, please make yourself known, show yourself. This is Air Force Rescue. We are here to pick you up.
Helicopter rescue from a mountain ledge is the SEAL's last hope.
And I was thinking, wow, this is pretty small. Are we going to land here?
And I'm like, holy crap, if we bump over 15, 10 feet, whatever it may be, we're going to hit that wall.
The Special Operations' own rescue helicopter has just been shot down. Now, it's up to the US Air Force Reserve to take on a mission where the best of the best have already failed.
America cannot afford to lose another helicopter on that mountain.
High above the Gulf of Mexico, a US Air Force Pave Hawk helicopter is low on gas. These volunteer pilots are with the 920th Rescue Wing, the only reserve rescue wing in the US Air Force. They're rehearsing the delicate art of in-air refueling. It's a vital skill they'll need to fly combat search and rescue missions in Afghanistan.
I came in the Air Force 23 years ago to be a rescue helicopter pilot. That's been a dream of mine even since I was in high school. You know, everybody has their choosing in life, and that's just something that I wanted to do.
1155, they're ready for disconnect. Okay, coming down for disconnect.
Today, Jeff McCrander is commander of operations in this unique aviation unit. For several months of the year, they fly active duty in war zones, before many of them return to their civilian jobs. In the summer of 2005, 2 helicopter crews from the 920th are nearing the end of their tour in Afghanistan.
We'd have maybe a couple, 2-3 day turnover and then be home, and we already had plans for the 4th of July and parties, and unfortunately none of that happened.
Of course, all good war stories start with there I was. So there I was getting ready to take a shower, and my roommate comes running in and says, hey, the radio just went off and they want you to report to ops right now with a 3-day bag.
This 3-day operation will be a daunting challenge. They are to locate a covert 4-man Navy SEAL team high in the mountains of the Hindu Kush. While attempting to assassinate a high-ranking Al-Qaeda leader, the SEALs have been caught in a Taliban counterattack. Finding themselves completely surrounded, they call for help. A Chinook, packed with Special Operations troops, sets off to extract them in broad daylight. Just as the helicopter makes its approach, a rocket-propelled grenade bursts through the open rear door, exploding the fuel tanks. Everyone on board is killed. It's the single biggest loss of American life in the Afghanistan war. Reeling from this devastating blow to their rescue effort, Special Operations Command turned to the reservists of the 920th Rescue Wing for help.
Smart pack for you.
I think that they definitely look down on us, question our training, our crews, our capabilities.
I spent a lot of time interacting with the ops officer there, well, educating them on our capabilities and what we really brought to the fight, and why we were the right people to be up there doing what we were trying to do. Our confidence was high that if there was somebody there and they were alive, we were going to find them.
Skinny will be leading his men into the same valley where the Taliban shot down the Chinook. But instead of the lumbering Chinook, Skinny's crews will be flying one of the most sophisticated helicopters in the world. A toned-up version of the famous Black Hawk.
We call it a Pave Hawk.
The Pave Hawk is a rescue pilot's dream.
This is our hydraulic hoist that has 200 feet of cable. Portion of
Using
our
its in-air refueling probe, the Pave Hawk's pilots can fly non-stop for 14 hours.
Another great thing about the aircraft is this FLIR turret and color weather radar.
Its infrared camera and color radar enable it to fly in virtually any weather, day or night. And it has anti-missile defenses.
It's a very awesome helicopter.
And I like to think rescue really is one of the most specialized operations in the Air Force. I mean, based on our training and our tactics and that kind of thing. We always like to think of ourselves as special, too.
Each rescue helicopter trains with a crew of 6. 2 pilots, a flight engineer, a gunner, and 2 para-rescue men in the back. The para-rescue men, or PJs, are elite graduates of the so-called Superman School.
We're used to the exciting things, jumping out of airplanes and scuba diving and shooting and running and in the middle of the night and just doing wild things.
PJs are among the most highly trained emergency trauma specialists in the US military. It's the PJs who will be first out of the helicopter when they reach the landing zone. Shortly before nightfall, Skinny's 2 crews set off for their search for the SEAL team, but they have limited information on where to look. This dangerous mission will test their skills to the limit. Combat rescue missions are preferably flown under cover of darkness. By hugging the ground at night, it's almost impossible for the enemy to see or hear them approaching. To enable the pilots to see in the dark, they wear night vision goggles. These image intensifiers amplify the available light from the moon and the stars by up to 5,000 times onto a green phosphor screen. The human eye can distinguish more shades of green than any other color.
When I first started flying goggles in pilot training, it was very difficult to try to look through what I envisioned as toilet paper tubes. You have zero peripheral vision. You constantly got to keep your head on a swivel. It just was difficult. As you can see, they're out away from my eye. But over time, as you got more and more goggle experience, it starts becoming second nature. And now, of course, we don't even think about it.
If it's cloudy or overcast, they can also use their infrared camera to navigate the mountain passes at night. It detects heat, even when there is absolutely no light. Having been baked all day by the sun, the ground registers as a glowing image in the cockpit. Eight hours into their search, high up in the Hindu Kush Mountains, the rescuers are still looking and listening for any signal that could locate the SEAL team.
Because, you know, you hear the radio key and you're like, oh, they're right here, you know, they got to be close by, but it's just finding the needle in the haystack. Those mountains were 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet high and a lot of area to cover.
They fly as close as they dare to the mountainside. The faint clicking on the emergency frequencies suggests someone down there is trying to make contact.
I can remember just pleading in my mind, please, please, and we were even doing it over the radios. Please make yourself known. Show yourself. Do anything because, you know, this is Air Force rescue. We are here to pick you up.
We were very concerned about what we would call a SAR trap, you know, where the bad guys now maybe have captured these guys and are using their signaling devices to lure the helicopters in to shoot them down. And they had obviously demonstrated an ability to shoot down U.S. helicopters in that area because we were searching the same area where they had just shot down a U.S. helicopter.
Despite fears of being lured into a trap, they do not want to abandon the search. They know that if they don't find the missing SEALs soon, the Taliban surely will. It's been a long night for the combat search and rescue crews. After hours of searching, they've still not made contact with the missing SEAL team. They return to base before sunup takes away their cover of darkness. Shortly after dawn, there's a breakthrough.
Stop right there.
An old man arrives at a remote Marine base with a handwritten message from a Navy SEAL. The SEAL's name is Marcus Luttrell. He reveals that he is the sole survivor of the 4-man Special Forces team. The others have been killed in an ambush, and he is badly wounded. Luttrell is being sheltered in the old man's village, which has been blockaded by the Taliban. Within hours, the helicopter crews have a satellite photo of the mountain village where Luttrell is hiding. Now Skinny must devise a rescue plan. First to pick up Luttrell, then to recover the bodies of his fallen comrades.
You know, as a flight lead, you feel a lot of responsibility because all these guys are your guys, and it's your job to get them in and get them out so they can get back to their families. And it's just one of those things where you kind of stand there and say a prayer, and it's like, oh Lord, please don't let me screw this up.
This is the moment every combat rescue pilot dreams about, yet dreads. It's when they must put to the test their years of training. On combat missions, their tactic is to use 2 helicopters to protect each other. Flying into a dangerous landing zone, or LZ, is a skill they practice back home in the Arizona desert.
Most of our training is to be able to get into and out of an LZ, 1, as fast as we can, and 2, having tactics where we can cover each other.
The lead aircraft makes a fast, low-level pass over the landing zone to draw enemy fire. It then pulls up hard and high, leaving the second aircraft to slip in for the pickup. Working together, the entire crew guides the pilot into the trickiest spots by relaying back to him every obstacle and danger.
If you do that in a smooth, coordinated, relaxed manner, we all work together, so we know how we think. And if you hear a person's voice starting to get a little shrill, you know who they are, what the problem is, that there is a problem.
Board 10. No, out. Board 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 35 left. Door's good. So we're holding that, simulating that this is the only place we can go due to terrain and winds. How's my tail? Tail's well clear. Roger that. How high am I? You're about 20. Copy, 20 feet. Top left. Coming right. Sorry. Power's good, 88. You're okay.
These maneuvers are difficult enough in Arizona in daylight. But flying into the Afghan mountains at night, they're extremely hazardous, particularly with the Taliban lying in wait to shoot down another helicopter. On this mission, Skinny decides he will go first in the lead helicopter and drop a glow stick to mark the landing zone. For Spanky, this is the first time he hears that he will be landing in the second helicopter to pick up Luttrell.
And that's when my heart sank. My comfort level shifted, if you will. Now I frantically started paying more attention to the brief, looking harder at the landing zone. We couldn't really tell the angle. We didn't really understand the sheer steepness of the terrain.
For some of the Pavehawk crew, it's their first deployment with combat search and rescue. They seriously underestimate the challenges that lie ahead.
One of our senior gunners came up to me and he was like, "Do you know that some of us wait our entire careers for one of these?" I had no idea what he's talking about. I was just going back to get a couple of pairs of underwear and toothbrush and toothpaste, and I really didn't know what I was getting into.
Piece of cake. Not going to be a problem at all because it looked like a big football field. We're like, hell yeah, we'll come in and do a run-on landing. We just figured, hey, it's just like a big deal.
For the more experienced crew members, the fear of failure is all too real.
You start thinking about your family, about my 4 little boys at home and my wonderful wife, and just saying, you know, if not just for them, don't screw up.
All shots, you guys have a good flight to see. Roger that, thanks.
Now I know the route we're taking. I realize where we're flying through. We're flying in the same area, the same valley that the Chinook had just recently been shot down. And what I found out again that day was that it's within about 2 miles from the location where we watched a guy on the mountain shoot an RPG at our aircraft, and it actually went between the lead and a trail aircraft. So the RPG went right in the middle of our 2 aircraft, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, they've shot at us once. The next time they shot at somebody, they shot them down. We're flying back into that exact same area. I guess it became real at that point.
This time the US command is leaving nothing to chance. One of the biggest combat rescue operations ever mounted in the war is underway. Their task, to rescue Luttrell and retrieve the bodies of his fallen comrades. On the ground, Army Rangers creep towards their target. In the sky, Apache attack helicopters and A-10 Warthogs will target the Taliban positions. A giant refueling aircraft will provide backup. And flying high above the whole operation, a Spectre gunship. At the moment of rescue, this will illuminate the landing zone with a night sun. A giant infrared spotlight invisible to the naked eye, but clear to everyone wearing night vision goggles. With so many people involved, radio chatter crowds the airwaves.
Intensity of the calls got louder and louder and quicker, and until it was at times some guys, it seemed like we're screaming on the radio.
It's very tempting just to pull up the radios, but you know, you gotta keep your ears open. It is just constant chatter. It's hard enough to hear your crew, let alone assets that aren't even on the same continent. Everybody wants to know the status. What's the status? What's the status?
As the Pave Hawks speed on to their destination, one call penetrates the radio chatter. A new location for the pickup point.
The coordinates for the survivor have changed by 2 kilometers.
In this steep mountain terrain, a difference of 2 kilometers could mean landing on a valley floor or on a cliff face.
That sparked a little helmet fire for me. We're inbound, we're freaking 3 minutes out from the LZ, and I'm like, I don't need a grid coordinate right now, because I can't come in focused inside this aircraft and put that in fast enough.
Just not good. No.
Despite the last-minute confusion from Command HQ, Skinny tells his co-pilot JP they have to go in. An extra decimal place on the end of the coordinates has almost jeopardized the entire mission.
It turns out, due to a misapprehension of what the scale of the maps and the coordinate format that they were using, the actual objective did not change the 2 kilometers that we were told. It changed precisely 2 meters on the map.
Now Skinny and Spanky make their final approach. They turn off the main river valley and begin a steep ascent. The moon isn't up yet, and clouds shrouding the mountains are blocking what little light there is from the stars.
Once we turned up the canyon, it seemed to get darker. There was not very much illumination at all. Our goggles were basically almost shutting down because of that.
Now to see in the dark they have to rely on their infrared camera. The small screen displays the residual heat from the mountain rocks, outlining the horizon ahead.
Left side.
Below them, a battle rages between US forces and the Taliban. The valley is alive with infrared marker strobes. These bright pulses are only visible with night vision goggles. Every ranger on the ground and US aircraft in the sky identifies themselves in this way.
Everybody in their right mind is turning on their strobe light and saying, hey, I'm a friendly, don't shoot over here.
IR strobe looks a lot like, muzzle flashes. It's really hard to keep your calm and not be trigger happy.
They are entering a dangerously hot war zone. To reduce the risk of being hit by enemy fire, they begin evasive maneuvers, yanking and banking through the twists and turns of the valley. But as they climb higher up the mountains, the air becomes thinner, so the performance of the helicopter's rotor blades is drastically reduced. The only way to maintain their roller coaster ride is to lose weight. And the only way to do that is to dump fuel.
So I opted just to dump fuel where we were going, and unfortunately, it wasn't unpopulated. The local Afghanis actually sleep outside during the summer months, but I had to make that decision. I want that extra buffer. And I remember saying as my co-pilot reached up to flip the safety wired thing, this is for Penny and the boys, I remember.
As Spanky scans ahead, the strobe flashes continue to pepper the mountainside.
This is really bad. It's scary dark, but at least the landing zone's going to be illuminated.
But there's no sign of the spotlight Spanky is expecting. The infrared night sun on board the Spectre gunship cannot burn through the cloud layer to illuminate the landing zone.
And I remember the gunship very loudly screaming, "Halos, negative burn, negative burn."
The helicopter's landing zone is shrouded in total darkness. Deep in Afghanistan, a massive combat search and rescue mission is closing in on its target, Navy SEAL Marcus Luttrell. On the ground, a battle is raging between US forces and the Taliban. In the air, the helicopter pilots have a problem. On their final approach to the pickup point, they're flying blind. The Spectre gunship, flying high above, is still unable to shine its infrared spotlight through the layers of cloud. Flying much lower, the A-10 Warthogs begin attacking the Taliban positions. One Warthog pilot spots a gap in the cloud, and with split-second timing, pinpoints the landing zone with his targeting laser.
It's just a beam of light exactly where I needed to land.
It was like the finger of God. Like, there's a LZ. That's how we got a really good sight of what the LZ looked like.
This landing zone is no football field. It's a tiny shelf hacked from the side of a mountain.
To be honest, it was the size of an LZ that I don't think pilots would even land in the daytime if they really had the chance. I mean, I was thinking, wow, this is pretty small. Are we going to land here?
Okay, I'll come around, pilots controls for the control. Brandy or Dogbone got any chem lines?
Flight leader Skinny prepares to drop the glow stick that will mark the spot where Spanky is to land in the second helicopter.
I'm showing right over. Okay, 100 feet. 3, 2, 1, mark.
Ignoring all the gunfire, Skinny scores a bullseye with the glow stick and banks steeply away to draw enemy fire. If the Taliban take the bait, the path should now be clear for Spanky in helicopter number 2 to make the pickup.
On the approach.
Because once he calls on the approach, then we give him altitude, airspeed, and we're looking at the ground, looking for obstacles, and they're clearing us into the LZ.
Just over, please.
You're listening to the pilots talk amongst themselves, and you've got the engineer and the gunner. They're all discussing this. It's such an interactive process to fly a helicopter. You wouldn't believe it, but especially in that context, it was unbelievable.
And the LZ starting to come into view there. 2, 1, clear flat left. Power's good. Okay.
I never got the sense that it was going to be that tricky. I knew it was going to be a bit hairy.
3 feet.
Low altitude.
60 feet.
As commander, Spanky takes the controls for the final approach.
Pilot's control. Pilot's controls. Yeah, I got him. Looking good, crew. Plenty gas, 2,000 pounds. Power's good, 65.
And setting up for the landing, I thought, you know, I think it's actually going to work. And then it all went south in a hurry.
You can feel the pitch change. You can feel the pitch in the blades. You can hear the engines. Even though my adrenaline had been going, my heart started beating a little bit more. It was like, okay, here we are. Let's just stay focused.
Probably slight down slope.
You know, all the way up to that point, all the way up to where we were 10 feet above the ground, everything was nice and calm.
430. 420. 4, 3, 2, 1.
And then, brownout.
In the last seconds of the approach, the downwash of the rotors whips up a blinding cloud of desert dust.
And that's probably a helicopter pilot's worst nightmare. Up in the mountains, on a very dark night, in a very tight, confined space, browning out, and now losing all visual references.
Now I can no longer see the strobe lights on the LZ. And if I can't see the strobe lights on the LZ, the pilots can't see the strobe lights on the LZ, and that becomes a problem.
We've got instruments to kind of tell us our drift, but it's just, we can't fly with our eyes closed, and it feels like you've got your eyes closed. If I was drifting and tried to bring it down on the ground, my tires would hit, and I would inevitably, most likely, roll over.
In a brownout, it's hard to tell whether the helicopter is drifting to left or right. A pilot landing blind on an uneven surface risks rolling over. The first wheel to touch the ground becomes a tipping point that can trigger disaster.
It's very easy for the helicopter to continue and pivot on that point, roll over, blades hit the ground, and that's all she wrote.
As they brace themselves for touchdown, Spanky's crew are all on maximum alert.
I remember looking to my left, and I could see a wall from the mountain. And I just saw that, and I'm like, holy crap, if we, bump over 15, 10 feet, whatever it may be, we're going to hit that wall. Then Spanky saw on his side a 1,500, 2,000 foot drop off.
On a narrow ledge in a brownout, there's little room for error.
I started drifting, unfortunately, left towards the rock face, where my rotors would hit and inevitably crash, and then we'd have a bigger problem on our hands.
I told the guys in the back, I'm like, if you guys are praying, guys, you might want to pray now.
Being in the business as long as I have, I know that helicopter crashes are nasty, and there's one thing you can do to kind of maybe save yourself, and it's lay down. Because at that point, I figured we're going to crash.
By now, Spanky should be safely on the ground, but he's still hovering blind in the dust, completely dependent on directions from his crew.
You can hear the pilots just back and forth, stop left, stop right, stop left, and it just continues. The pilot has controls, co-pilot, and it was an orchestra of I don't even know how to explain it.
I had noticed the tail had gotten somewhere between 2.5 to 5 feet of some of the trees. I told the pilot, and as I was kind of turning around the aircraft and I had to get my bearings about me and figure out which was left and which is right to him, to me, to the aircraft. And so it got a little confusing.
If you got a nice, calm person in the back saying, hey man, stop right, you need to come a little left, you're going to put a little left correction in. When you got somebody in the back screaming, stop right, you're going to react to whatever you're hearing in the back, because there could be some big tree there and you really want to get the aircraft away.
The warning shouts to avoid hitting the wall or the trees make Spanky pull the aircraft hard right. At the same moment, Gonzo, fearful of the drop-off on the other side, goes to the dual controls to prevent Spanky overcorrecting.
I just put my hand up by the stick because I was expecting a huge correction, and I just kept Spanky from making that. My technique is when I come into the LZ, 10 feet off the ground, and look for a reference, a rock, anything that's not going to blow away. And I went down and looked, and I just didn't see nothing. It was just dust.
Things started going in slow motion. I knew we were going to crash, and I knew I was going to let everybody down. Everything starts rolling through your head. Mission preparation, your family, your kids, and just the sense of grief and failure, like we came here to pick this guy up that needs our help, and now I'm going to crash and roll down the mountain. But right when I felt that all was lost, when the dust cleared just enough, I couldn't see the ground, I couldn't see the rock face, I couldn't see anything, but that terrace that was on my left side came in front of me, and about 50 feet, 40 feet off my nose, I could see what I could describe as a hanging pot as a child on our back patio, where my mom had these pots that hung out on our porch, if you will, and the plant would just drape off of it. And when the wind blew, the leaves would rustle and stuff. And that was the only thing I could see. I couldn't see the ground, I couldn't see the village, I couldn't see the rock wall, I couldn't see anything but this blowing bush. It was a hover reference that I had that could tell me left or right or up or down, and I instantly was able to get control of the aircraft into a solid hover.
Only when the dust settles do they realize the incredible tightness of the landing zone.
We were probably less than 2 feet from the edge. I wouldn't even have done this in Tucson during the day, probably. It would just have been stupid. Yeah, I wouldn't have done it even during the day.
And now be advised, Renegade will be egressing on the right side of the aircraft.
We landed. Their job is done. Well, for the meantime, my job begins. So we jump out, and as we're coming out, I see something directly straight behind the tail rope. Whatever this is coming at us, we don't want it to get anywhere near the helicopter. You have to kind of protect the crew as well. It's part of the deal. So I see what looks to be a man, big guy, and he's wearing Afghani clothes. We call them man jammies. And one of the things that went through my head was, if it were an American, let's just say an American were dressed up, their chances are they're not going to walk up to a tail rotor. They know it's a helicopter. I'm going to go around, and that's just a rule. You don't go near the tail rotor. So at this point in time, I had to think quickly, and I drew my weapon, and my plan was to shoot him, because at this point he was a threat to me. A second individual comes out from behind him. So now I'm thinking, okay, I've got two guys that are threats. I'm just going to shoot both. I literally had my finger on the trigger, and then immediately, and thank God, the third person comes out from behind. And the third person was clearly United States military. I'm looking at him now. I'm this close. I know he's American.
This is a U.S. Ranger, and he quickly indicates which of the men is Luttrell. To check his surprise, Luttrell is dressed in Afghani clothes and also able to walk.
I immediately, instinctively, go into an authentication role. And one of the things I'd memorized was his favorite superhero was Spider-Man. He also had his dog's name. Now, I really only needed to ask him one question, but I went ahead and asked him both. But anyway, I asked him, what's your favorite superhero? And he looked at me like, what? What are you talking? Oh, Yeah, I know. Okay. He told me it was Spider-Man. Excellent. Same with me. He's my favorite superhero as well.
Once Marcus Luttrell's identity is confirmed, they realize he needs urgent medical attention. They will have to fly him back to base before attempting to locate the dead bodies of his friends.
There's still a battle going on, like literally 100 meters from where we are. I mean, it's literally as we sit there. And I'm thinking, we haven't left yet. What's going on here? And they're waiting for me, so I hit the mic and I said, go, go, go. And they were like, all right. And then we were up and at it.
1, 3, 2, 1.
I pulled straight up and then just dove off of the cliff into the dark hole.
And then, of course, all the chatter came back on the intercom. Everything was going crazy. I looked at Marcus. I started talking to him. He sat in a corner. It was kind of surreal at this point. I kind of realized that we just rescued him, and this guy, you know, and all of his buddies are dead. So as I look into Marcus, I got my night vision goggle and I'm focusing it. And I just want to get a good look at him, and you can see the look in his eyes. You can just see the intensity that this guy had been through, and I don't even know how to explain what I saw, but it was pretty amazing. I tapped him on the shoulder. I shook his hand. I said, "Welcome home, brother."
With only 5 minutes of fuel remaining, they just make it to a forward base where they deliver Marcus Luttrell. With his legs full of shrapnel, a SEAL to the end, he insists on walking to the medical unit.
We landed back in Jalalabad, and I'm just like, man, just looking at Spankin' like, oh yeah, man, we did it. We're done.
That's when everything started hitting me. The PJs in the back, especially Perchecki, was hooping and hollering. He was standing outside my window, pounding on the glass. And I just remember thinking, they have no idea how close we were to crashing. And I don't think they fully realized just how close they were to balling it up on the mountainside. And that's when the wave of adrenaline left me, and I just start shaking.
Spanky's thoughts are now 7,000 miles and half a world away. For Skinny and the men of the 920th Rescue Wing, there is one last job. Somewhere on that black mountainside lie the bodies of 3 Navy SEALs. To bring them home, the rescue crews will fly into one of the most hostile environments they've ever encountered. Having saved Navy SEAL Marcus Luttrell, the 920th Rescue Wing prepares for an even riskier mission. Since the Civil War, every effort has always been made to recover and identify the bodies of American soldiers. The bodies of Luttrell's fallen comrades lie in terrain so steep, it's impossible to land. Instead, the helicopters will hover to allow the para-rescuemen to rappel down. But there's an added complication flying at night in the high mountains of Afghanistan. The air is so thin, the rotor blades do not generate enough lift to allow the fully equipped rescue helicopter to hover. This becomes particularly acute when attempting to hover over a steep slope. Hovering near a flat surface causes the flow of air through the rotor disc to slow down. Known as ground effect, this makes hovering easier. Pilots think of it as a cushion of air. But a helicopter hovering over a steep slope, as it will have to on this mission, no longer benefits from ground effect. To achieve the same amount of lift, it will either need more power or less weight. Otherwise, it will be in trouble. Before they take Checky and the para-rescue men back in again, they'll need to drastically reduce their load.
How do you lighten these helicopters? Well, you take these big heavy fuel tanks off. You take these big heavy machine guns off. We thought it just might work.
They pulled everything off of that helicopter that wasn't nailed down, and they pulled off some things that were nailed down. I made the hard call to say, we're going to pull all the weapons and ammo off, too.
I was like, what? What do you mean you're going to take the guns? I was told in tech school that when you deploy, you'll never take your hand off the weapon. Well, that didn't really work out so well.
I even went so far as to remove the body armor in the back of my vest, just because that's really heavy. Of course, I didn't tell anybody that, because that's a no-no.
At their pre-flight briefing at Bagram Air Base, a senior officer reminds Skinny of the fate of the downed Special Forces Chinook.
He basically said, America cannot afford to lose another helicopter on that mountain. I mean, those were his words to me. Where we were going in, the 47 had crashed just on the other side of the same mountain that we were about to go and hover on.
This time it's Skinny who'll be making the pickup. In the middle of the night, they fly out to the place where US Rangers on the ground have found the bodies of the SEALs.
We entered a hover, I think it was about 85 feet, but you have to understand, it was 85 feet above a point that was on a very, very steep incline.
And there were basically about 40 to 60-foot trees all around the LZ, but there was a fairly clear area that was just big enough for me to kind of snuggle down inside of that, where, you know, I'm kind of looking at the top of the trees out my window.
So here I was, looking straight out of the aircraft, trying my best to keep Skinny away from drifting towards these trees as he's getting calls from both crew members in the back as to exactly where to place his hoist hook.
Surrounded by gunfire, the PJs now rappel down to locate the bodies.
So you're on the side of a mountain with night vision goggles, and you're trying to tie knots, and you've got gloves on, and you're trying to negotiate rocks. Then you get to the site where the body is. You've got to tie in. You hope that you're able to secure the body so it doesn't, you know, it could literally fall.
Hovering above the PJs, the Pavehawk's engines strain to maintain lift.
You've got rock slides from the top of the mountain coming down on you. And you got to remember, you're a combatant in a wartime theater. So you've got to post teams all around to secure that operation so you don't necessarily have to worry about shooting when somebody else hopefully will be shooting for you. So there's a lot going on.
As ground troops exchange fire with the Taliban, the PJs secure the bodies. It's time to bring the last men home and lay them to rest.
Tower Charlie 22 at the HTA Gulf Links departure.
I realized halfway home, it's 4th of July. And I said, you know, you don't get much more patriotic than this.
Someone, I wish it was me, but it was not, had the forethought to take 2 American flags. It was a wonderful touch and a wonderful service that these guys did, covering the body bag with the American flag to hail them appropriately.
That was a pretty emotional moment to realize that what we had just been through, you know, these guys had been through a lot more, obviously, and paid the ultimate price for their activities. But I mean, here we had just gone through all this stuff to get these. And I mean, it was kind of an emotional breather. It was still dark when we landed back at Bagram, I remember. And of course we landed and we taxied in. And there was a group of people that were standing around. And I remember these folks, basically when the doors open, they all snap to attention because they see the flags there.
With outstanding bravery, the men of Air Force Reserve Combat Search and Rescue have saved Luttrell and recovered the bodies of his comrades.
We're rescue guys. We always want to bring everybody back alive if we can. I mean, there's a little bit of pride in me to know that that I helped bring him back to his family. Even though I would have rather, I mean, as rescue guys, we'd rather bring them all back alive if we could. That just wasn't in our cards that day to be able to do that. So
it was a huge honor for me to know that Skinny trusted me enough to send me in to do, quite frankly, that a lot of us never will do in our career. And I thank him for that.
Even as mere reservists, even as guys that spend most of their time, at 30,000 feet rather than 30 feet in the air, even as guys that are more often concerned with peanuts and Dr. Pepper rather than getting a guy out of a combat situation, when we're called upon, we're just as capable, just as effective as any active duty unit could possibly be.
For their heroism, each crew member of the helicopter rescue team was awarded the Air Force Medal. Spanky now helps devise the latest rescue procedures. Checky is training to be a doctor. And Skinny now has 4 squadrons under his command.